name is Bhatt, and I'm CEO of the Silverstone Technology Cluster. Welcome to this Access to Finance event in partnership with Bank and Innovate UK. Should be a really exciting session today, so very much looking forward to it. I just want to kick off very quickly with a couple of words about the STC and who we are and what we do. So we founded in 2017. We're a not-for-profit cluster support organisation, so we exist to help the advanced engineering, electronics and software businesses by the Silverstone area. Obviously, we were founded in 2017 by founding partners here, obviously Barclays, and hosting us today. Thank you very much for having us today, and also our founding partner of the STC. So the three main strands of work that we do is focused around promotion, support, and thought leadership. So promotion is kind of twofold. So there's promotion of the cluster as a whole. In the report that was done in 2016, that's who our founding. It actually came out that we feel this is the best place in the world for advanced engineering. They were asked if they had the opportunity to improve their business anywhere in the world, where would they move to make it better? And most currently everybody said they would stay here. So obviously it's up to us to sort of promote that. Now clearly we're not Coca-Cola, so there's more work to be done, but we're making some traction. So we've got some good international interest. We've had about 6 different delegations coming in from China. We've also engaged with people like VA Systems, UK government, and also Amazon Web Services, who all joined and are engaging with us to get access to our highly innovative businesses. As I mentioned before, there's the advanced engineering, electronics and software businesses in the wider Silverstone area. There's around 4,500 of them. They're primarily SMEs, but they're highly innovative, and they provide solutions for global organizations that are looking for these, and we assist them with that. The second part of the promotion bit is promotion of the companies themselves. The cluster is actually uniquely multi-sectorial, so the Silverstone name obviously lets people think that as motorsport, but it's not a motorsport cluster. Motorsport is actually only about 20% of what it does do, because what's happened that a lot of the businesses started off as motorsport businesses, but have since diversified into lots of different ones. And so because it is uniquely multi-sectorial, we will have people that mainly work in medical, and we will have people that mainly work in F1 and oil and gas, for instance. But we can then spot technology benefits for either companies, and then we put them together to encourage them to collaborate. That's a big part of what we do. So that's why we also do several networking events, and we have sort of one-to-one matching and lots of work to do all that sort of stuff. When it comes to support, by that we are really focused around business growth. So we do a number of business growth events. It's really to help businesses with the sort of business management skills, if you will. So we have a series of events and webinars. We also try to create new opportunities. So we've done sector-specific events about the space sector and defense and national security and things like that to open up opportunities for our members in those. We've partnered up with Be the Business, through whom we offer mentoring programs and also SME advisory board. And then obviously, why we're here today is that we've partnered up with British Business Bank to run a series of events, not just the one here today, all focused around finance. And then we've partnered up with Amazon Web Services as well to run an innovation program to help companies bring new ideas to the market. And then finally, on the thought leadership bit, what we've done there is we've put together special interviews around different areas of technology, again, with focus on bringing people together in person to collaborate. This is very much members-led, so they come to us with what they want to have special interviews about, and then we facilitate that. So the 4 that we have at the moment is future mobility, so all future transport-related stuff, digital and advanced manufacturing, so Industry 4.0, but also additive manufacturing and things. Then design, simulation, metrology, that's where all the weird stuff comes in terms of metrology, the movement, digital twinning, but also quantum sensing and lots of other stuff I don't understand. And then we have wearable technologies, anything in or around which is very cool as well. So that's a very, very brief overview of who we are and what we do. I'd now like to hand over to Liz to say a couple of words as our host today. So, Liz, to you.
So, hi everyone, I'm Liz, the ecosystem manager of Bhatt. So, if you haven't found out already, it's to use and use the studio on the way out to the right and on the landing. So, we're not expecting a fire alarm test. This has already been done today, actually. So, you'll see year 1 is the real one. Please head out here. the meeting points out there. So basically, as I said, I work as the manager for Cranfield, and I just want to tell you a bit about Eagle Labs. So Eagle Labs started 6 years ago as a bit of an experiment to help businesses in the ecosystem thrive and grow by offering our spaces, our mentoring, and our know-how to support them. The rest is history. 6 years on, we have 10 Eagle Labs in the country, with more in the pipeline, which is to be talked about. What we do is we offer a space to support businesses to grow and scale up. We offer that by offering mentoring and coaching, getting them to the right people that they need to really help them to grow and scale up. We have partnered with quite a lot of industries that we really help to support this growth and scaling up, because we're very collaborative by nature. When we work together, we achieve more for the businesses that we support them. So we have quite a lot of people that we partner with this agenda. We do have a lot of industry programs that we work with. So we have agri-tech, we actually have an Eagle Lab farm, we have non-tech, we have AI, energy, few minutes. There is a tech out there, Eagle Lab has something to do with it. And then we have the industry capability as well, we have spaces. So during lunch, if we show you around the spaces, so you can see our maker space. So if any of the businesses have an idea that they want to prototype, engineers will support the prototype, test them to make sure things go okay for them to the business. And as I mentioned, we offer space, mentoring, support, rapid prototype, and support the businesses we need to go to. We do a lot of programs as well. So our Black Founder Accelerator program is in its 10th year now. We've supported over 1,000 Black founders to get to the next stage. All the reports that came with disparities of outcome Black founders can face. We decided to do something about it. And then we do one of the programs we do as well is the funding readiness program, and we support businesses to learn anything they need to do for grants, crowd, and funding. We have a chance to speak to help one-to-one as well. One of the ones that we do, which is actually open at the moment, is the Global Connect program. So if a business is looking to fundraise in the Silicon Valley, we do a program and we used to take them to the Silicon Valley and have that experience. However, because of COVID, we're doing it virtually now, and it's actually open, so we found from the website to see if something that we're interested in. I've mentioned the mentoring and coaching and the programs and events that we do. We have partnership with quite a few different people, so Code-based, Capital Enterprise, and Cambridge Ag Business School. And you don't have to be a member of the Eagle Lab to benefit from that. So if you see anything on our website and you think this person is someone that you'd be happy to speak with, please speak with me. I'm happy to book a 1-hour session with you to speak with them and see how they can add value to your businesses. I've mentioned about the prototypes, and these are some of the capabilities that the maker spaces have for rapid prototyping. And I would stop here, and I'm going to hand over to Luke Springer, Senior Manager for the British Business Fund. And I'll be around, so during lunchtime, speak to me about the same that we can support you. Thank you.
It's really great to be in a physical environment after the last 2.5 years or so, isn't it? Although the trials and tribulations I think probably a few of us had, I'm not sure it's completely gone away. So I'd also welcome people joining us virtually today. As Liz quite rightly said, my name is Luke Stringer. I'm a senior manager in an organisation called the British Business Bank, and I guess although we hid away 3 years ago, we've actually had to come to the fore over the last 2.5 years because of COVID and the various initiatives that we've acted on behalf of government for, which I'll touch on a little bit. So let me explain a little bit about who we are first. We're government 100% owned by the taxpayers economic development bank. That basically means is that we're there to make it easy to access the finance they need to grow. So we do interventions, but we do that through what we call delivery partners, and actually we'll have a number of delivery partners on the various panels today. So our mission is to make it easier for SMEs to access the finance they need to grow, and more recently we've added that net zero dimension to our mission statement. We have 7 objectives, bear with me, we're a public organisation, we get measured on those objectives by government quite rightly, but what we're really about is putting more money into the SME marketplace to make it easier for those businesses to access both debt and equity funding, and also to increase the variety of finance options that are available for businesses. I think we'll touch upon those various options and why it's important that we make businesses aware of those various options going forwards. We also about identifying the regional disparities in the marketplace. And again, on your seats, you've got a pamphlet for the Midlands Engine Investment Fund. And that's one of the ways in which the bank are trying to address those regional disparities around access to finance. It may seem strange, the virtual world that we've all lived in over the last 2 to 3 years, that there are those physical disparities. But actually, if I mention to you that in terms of equity growth capital, 75% is in London and South East, whereas less than 25% in the rest of the country. So again, there are some disparities there which the bank has also got an objective to address. And I'll talk about how we're doing that as well. You'll get these slides. I'm very conscious it's quite a detailed one, but we're quite unusual for a public body. Most public bodies will use money, they'll give this bit of grant, help provide support to businesses. We don't do that. We put money into the commercial marketplace. Dare I say, to get some of those existing providers and new ones to slightly change the way that they fund, invest SMEs in the marketplace by using public money. But we do so on the basis that we're actually adding value rather than competing with those providers and actually filling gaps. So in terms of the debts solutions, we start with what we call startup loans, which has become over the last 10 years a major way, even for innovative businesses, to access that first very small amount of money to get them going. And actually, we do millions and millions of startup loans through that program over the last 10 years. We have been responsible over the last 2 to 2.5 years for some of the COVID initiatives, whether it be bounce back loans, C-balls, but more recently, recovery loan scheme. There may or may not be an announcement of a replacement scheme for that shortly, depending on the politics. But again, what we're doing now is we're guaranteeing lending made by commercial lenders to make sure that businesses can still access the finance they need despite the current circumstances. And then actually the core business of the bank is to capitalise, put funding into some of those alternative lenders that have come to the fore, certainly over the last 6 to 8 years as well. But we're also unusually for a public body active in the equity marketplace as well, which is probably most pertinent for some of the businesses on today's seminar. So again, I've tried to crib a little bit from what we call the life cycle of business. Clearly, the early stage business, higher risk, and therefore the funding is more difficult to access. And as you get more established, that becomes less of a risk, and access to that finance is more appropriate. So what we do from an equity point of view, again, partly to address those regional disparities, we've set up a regional angels program whereby we've got investment vehicles that typically will invest in that angel space, and we put money into them, again, to partly encourage them to invest outside London and South East. We've also got a number of very long-standing programs. The most notable one of those is something called the Enterprise Capital Fund. And what we're doing there initially was to actually get new fund managers into the marketplace, investing at that early small stage. And because as the program becomes more established, it's about building that pot and building that supply of equity finance, typically addressing the equity gap of less than 2 million. And I talked about those regional disparities. We've also set up a series of regional funds that provide both debt and equity funding for businesses in certain areas of the country where we know they struggle to access that funding. More recently, we've set up 2 commercial arms. If you work in the public sector with public money, you know it can be quite restrictive and limited in some respects. And to reflect that and to reflect our experiences over the last 6 to 8 years, we've set up 2 commercial ventures, one of which is Bridging Patient Capital, which is typically providing larger sums of money to later stage businesses, but raising that funding typically on a commercial basis in the marketplace. I talked about those regional disparities, so let's talk a little bit about those regional funds. And I'm going to focus on the Midlands Engine Investment Fund, even though it says Midlands, and even though it says Midlands Engine, and even though we're in Cranfield in the South East Midlands, actually the area is covered by that Midlands Engine Investment Fund. The Sandwell actually contributed to that fund, and businesses as far down as Luton are able to access that funding stream. It was originally set up as a £250 million fund. On the basis of the success in deployment over the last 2.5 to 3 years, it actually got increased by a further 50 million to £300 million. I'm delighted to say, on the basis of the progress we've made with the regional funds, that as part of the comprehensive spending review last year, the Chancellor that was mentioned that actually we were going to have second iterations of the fund, and also put funds in other parts of the country, notably the South West and the 3 devolved nations. So actually that new Midlands fund will be bigger, and I think it will be less restricted by public sector funding, and I'm hoping therefore it'll be more focused on equity funding as a result of that. Explain a little bit about how the fund works. Again, it was specifically set up to address what we perceive to be gaps in the marketplace, and that was based on a substantial amount of research undertaken at the time. And they range from small business loans from £25,000 to 250k, typically where a high street will not step in, very early stage, startup businesses that may not have a track record of collateral to support it, to more traditional debt finance providers. We have 2 of those fund managers providing funding up to 1.5. Typically, they're doing deals that the bank aren't completely confident about doing. They'll typically lend in a way that high street would typically lend, but they're prepared to take a greater risk, and more importantly, they're prepared to fund working capital rather than just focus on the asset finance side of things. And because actually the gap in the Midlands is greatest around the equity piece, we've got 2 equity funds, a very, very early stage equity fund, which we probably stupidly called a proof of concept fund, because it's not really full of degree of viability, that runs up to £750,000, and an equity finance fund that provides funding up to £2 million. They're all provided by regulated fund managers, but with teams on the ground working with businesses. So again, the infographic, and this gives you an indication of what the fund has achieved as of the end of March, and we're deploying approximately 15 to 20 million pounds a quarter at the moment. The equity funds flew out the door because of the gap, and clearly over the last 2.5 years, the alternative debt providers to the fund have been a useful addition to the marketplace as high street have experienced problems with supporting businesses. So a substantial amount of businesses supported. Really, really pleased, because it was one of my initial concerns that the Sandwell areas performed particularly well in terms of deployment, and particularly well from an equity perspective. That may or may not come as a surprise to you, but it does reflect the economic base of the particular area. So I'm going to say thank you. I'm hosting this subsequent panels, but it's really great to be here today and working in partnership with Silverstone Technology Cluster and Innovate UK. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to the first presentation and invite Hemaxi to say thank you.
Morning, everyone. Really, really pleased to be here today. Morning, everyone who's online as well. And yes, I'm always pleased when these work. I suffer a little bit with technology. So yeah, I'm Hemaxi Bhatt. I'm from Innovate UK, and I am part of the Innovation team. I'm the programme lead over there. I'm going to sort of do a bit of a whistle-stop tour about what's available through Innovate UK. Whereas my sort of specialism lies within innovation loans, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Okay, so who are we? I'm sure many of you probably heard of UK Research and Innovation. Many of you may have heard of Innovate UK. You've applied for grants and the likes, but for those that haven't, I'd love to say that Innovate UK is UK's innovation agency. And what we're there for is to really support that business-led innovation, and we work right across the sectors, the technologies, the regions, and we are funded through government. So a lot of the grants and the other programmes I'm going to tell you about are all basically funded through sort of taxpayers' monies. So what's our mission? It's really about helping UK businesses grow through that development and commercialisation of your new products, services, processes, but also to make sure that we're supporting you with that innovation network ecosystem that's really agile, that's inclusive and easy to navigate. And these are all areas that we're still working on, and there's a lot of work that's going on within the background. So basically, the way we run our competitions, you'll see a list there. I've called them opportunities, they're called competitions, they're called rounds. You may hear them referred to as 4 different things. And so we're supporting R&D in the UK through fundamental research, feasibility studies, industrial research, or experimental development through a variety of different funding mechanisms. They run through a competitive process, and what we mean by that is that you have to apply for a grant or any of these programs, and you're up against a number of different companies as well. What I would say, to really understand each of these programs, do have a look at our website, because there's just so much that happens and changes as we're going through. So many of you may have already applied and know the processes, but were you aware that we ran so many and there's so much support out there? So let me just literally just whiz through them. The Innovate UK Smart Grants, Fast Grant. Tell me, just a show of hands, how many people have applied for a Smart Grant? Excellent. So you're aware of the process. So these are grant open competitions. The Smart Grant is open at the moment. Fast Start is open. Fast Start is focusing on the net zero and healthcare, and it's a grant and it provides also tailored support. And what I mean by that tailored support is to get the opportunity to work with another part of Innovate UK. It's already part of the Innovate UK family, and that's Innovate UK EDGE. Richard's going to tell you a little bit about that a bit later on. So what's available through Fast Start is grants of up to £50,000 for highly innovative ideas and for those companies that have got that clear route to commercial success. The Smart Grants, I think there's a pot of about 25 million, and that particular competition closes on the 27th of July, and the Fast Start closes on the 26th of July. Innovation loans, I will tell you a little bit more about a bit later. I've got a slide on that, similar with investor partnerships. And then we come across the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, and this fund is there to address the big societal changes being faced by UK businesses again at this moment in time. I'm going to literally whiz through this, otherwise I won't have the time to talk to you about innovation loans. Then we do a number of different managed programmes, which include things like working with the Advanced Propulsion Centre, the Centre for Connected Autonomous Vehicles, Highways England, we've worked with Network Rail, the Department for Transport. So there's lots of different things that we do around those managed programmes. And then there's a Small Business Research Initiative. And what SBRI does, that it brings together those government challenges and ideas and from businesses to create those innovative solutions. So it's working on those things that government's doing, what are you doing, and where can they work together. Knowledge transfer partnerships. So what that is a three-way partnership between businesses, academia and graduates. So if you've got an innovative idea, you can work with the university and the graduate to work with you within the business, and there's funding that's provided to cover some of the costs of that graduate working with you. And then ICURE, the Innovation to Commercialisation of University Research, that's a programme of commercialisation support for teams of academic researchers who want to explore the commercial potential of their research. And then we've got a number of different catalysts. I mean, I mentioned the biomedical and energy catalysts there. We've got agri-tech, and there's many, many others. And what they've got is they've got funding to help businesses and researchers commercialise their research and develop those innovative solutions to global challenges. They've actually got equipment as well that as companies you can tap into. And then the Future Leaders Fellowship, this is really something that supports those talented people in the university's businesses and other research and innovation environments. And there's funding that's available there. And finally, looking at that international, this really is about supporting those international collaborations. Some of you may have heard of Horizon Europe, Eureka, the Newton Fund. These are some things that were around. But that was a real, so this is not talk, but this is only some of the things that are available, and we're constantly running these competitions. So have a look on our website if you're interested and want more information. And as I said, these are all very much challenge responsive-led programs, and we do have strict eligibility criteria. So when you do look, make sure that you do meet that eligibility criteria. Each competition has a defined scope. So make sure that that is really what you want the grant for, and that meets your criteria as well. So it's great now. I get to talk about innovation loans, and I could talk about these for years, for days. So a lot of you may not have heard about innovation loans. We've been running a pilot. We started back in 2017. So around about 13, 14 competitions, but we were never a business as usual product for Innovate UK. That's all changed now, and we've got some funding now that's up to, we've got about 150 million available over the next 3 years, and we really are a business as usual product for Innovate UK now. And where we fit in, grants are great at the very outset to get you to that sort of proof of concept. And this is where then the innovation loans fits in. It's really for that late stage R&D and for businesses that have got that route to commercial success. We're looking for those businesses that are innovative and growth orientated, that are scaling and not just sort of starting out. Saying that, we have looked at pre-revenue businesses, and we've approved loans. It's a little bit harder, but that is something that we are, we're not saying it's a definite no. Obviously, businesses that are credit constrained and can't raise that finance anywhere else at all. And the bottom line really is that we're looking for businesses who can demonstrate that their innovation activities are really disruptive. They've got that potential, best potential for growth in the future. So what does the loan structure look like? And as I said before, we are running these as competitions. We're calling them rounds. And to apply, obviously you have to be late stage R&D. You need to be an SME. We won't look at collaborations, which obviously with grants that's possible to do. And we will actually fund 100% of the relevant R&D project costs. And loans are between 100,000 and 2 million are available. We've changed the loan amounts in recent months. You might say 7.4% interest rate is really, really high, but obviously there's a lot of risk involved in taking on this. But the really fabulous thing is that we will actually defer some of that interest, sort of 3.7%, during certain periods of the loan. Overall term is 7 years. And the way it's structured slightly differently to what you may see the banks, in the way that bank loan is structured. We have 3 periods. We have an availability period, an extension period, and a repayment period. And the availability period is really your R&D period. So this is when you're, as a company, you are undertaking all that R&D activity. And you can actually draw down on your loan quarterly in advance and pay for that R&D activity. You only pay interest on the amount that you've drawn down quarterly, and that's at 3.7%, with the rest deferred to the repayment period. And then we get to the extension period. The extension period is what really is your commercialisation period, and that can be up to 2 years. And when I say 2 years, it's either that, or if you start generating sales from that project, then that's the sooner date. Once again, you're only paying interest at 3.7% with the rest deferred. And then that comes to the repayment period, and that's when you will start paying the full amount, the principal, the interest, deferred interest at 7.4%. But we have sort of specific terms on there, but this is where the flexibility comes in. For the R&D activity, you can take up to 3 years. For the commercialisation or extension period, up to 2 years, and for the repayment, up to 5 years. But as long as the overall term doesn't exceed 7 years, so you could have 2 years for R&D, a year for commercialisation, and then 4 years to repay. And the great thing is it's really, really about supporting cash flow and supporting the business in those very, very early days when the revenue isn't coming through. We always get asked about security. Yes, we do take security, but that's in the form of a mortgage debenture. We don't take any personal guarantees. And obviously, mortgage debenture is really a fixed inflation charge over the assets of the business. So we're not asking for directors' guarantees or charges over directors' properties or anything along those lines. And then the other thing that we do insist upon is there are a couple of covenants that you need to meet during the period of the loan. And that's really just around affordability. We want to make sure that you can meet the interest repayments as they fall due, and then later during the repayment periods that you can meet the capital and the interest payments there as well. So what are we looking at for scope? For the future economy rounds, we've focused those very much around what we have within the Innovate UK plan for action. So these areas are around net zero, and really what we're looking at there is that it's those sort of zero carbon emissions and tackling that wider adverse environmental impact. So innovations in energy, impact of industrial processes and use of materials, agricultural foods, sorry, the lights on there, and capital intensity. So these are really, really key, and this is what we're saying. If you're looking at a loan, or if one of your customers is looking for a loan, this is where the scope needs to fit in. So under health and well-being, it's really around those innovations that are going to tackle that well-being, ill health, diet and food. And then we've got the 7 technology families, advanced materials, manufacturing, AI, engineering, electronics, photonics, environmental technologies, robotics. And then the last area is around the next generation digital technologies. With the scope, to be honest, I think they're wide enough to be able to meet most requirements. We don't get too many that we have to decline as a result of not meeting the scope. But these are the areas where we want you to tell us that you fit in, or this is where your project is going to fit in. So investor partnerships. This is another part of our team, and what that does, it brings together grant funding for those innovative projects, as well as and aligning that to VCs and equity investments in growing SMEs to accelerate investment and support growth through that innovation. So how it works is that we have a team of, when the competition's open, we have got VCs that we're working with, and as a company, you can apply for a grant, and we ask the VCs who want to invest in the company to be able to put together, I think it's somewhere either double or triple the amount that the grant funding. We're just in the process of having a new pot of money just approved, and putting together those new competitions that will start to roll out in hopefully in the next few months. So watch this space on there. The ones that we've run previously were very much around delivering on the industrial strategy side of things, addressing those regional imbalances and really supporting early stage innovation. But as I said, there will be more information about the investor partnerships coming through. Okay, really quickly, just to tell you about what we've done and achieved on the innovation loans so far. This is really from our pilot, so that ended in December, and at that time we had an interim evaluation done for us by SPW. And what they found is that, well, I can talk about the figures. We had around 1,000 applications come through for the innovation loans, and of that, 208 loans have been committed to 191 borrowers. We've actually had some companies who've been successful in more than one loan because they've had separate projects to do. So we're looking very roughly at sort of a 20% success rate on there. But what that survey, what that evaluation did for us was that they found that the programme was really, really successful, and some of these companies would not have found the funding that they needed without the innovation loan if they hadn't been successful. But they also found that because we were willing to commit, Innovate UK were willing to commit, they were able to leverage additional private investment. So just to finish off, I thought I'd just add a slide about the support for Innovate UK that Innovate UK has provided in the South East, and that's just the one region of 790 million. And really, it's still quite high per business in the South East at £930. North East seems to be, that innovation funding per business seems to be much higher than the East, but it just gives you a bit of a feel for what we're doing around the country. And I'm going to really rush through this because just want to tell you a little bit about the additional support, but that's Innovate UK EDGE. I'm not going to take Richard's thunder. He's going to tell you a little bit about that in his presentation. We've got KTN. KTN provide really the connectors is the best way to describe the support that's available. They can help you to meet or match sort of with regard to investors, financial advice, general advice, but it's about connecting you to the right people. And the catapults I've already mentioned really, really early. The great thing is these slides are going to be shared, so the information is all there. And I've also added in the links to all the relevant support there. So apologies for rushing through that at the end. I'm going to hand over to Lewis now, but thank you so much for your time and listening.
Delicately or indelicately trying to get onto those high stools. So if I can ask the first panellist, please, just to take a seat for me, that'd be really helpful. And whilst they're doing that, just to let you know that this is the first of the panel sessions that we're going to have. It's going to focus on funding for innovation. We're then going to take a 5 or 10 minute break, and then we're going to have a presentation from Richard, who's just disappeared, hopefully not for too long, to talk about the funding support available for the Innovate UK EDGE. We're going to have a similar panel there. You will have the opportunity in that mini break to speak to specific panellists, but we'll also try to fit in a Q&A at the end of that session as well. So I'm going to kick off the first session by just asking each of the panellists to introduce themselves. So Maxi, if you can reintroduce yourself, please.
Just in case you didn't get that, I'm Hemaxi Bhatt. I'm Programme Lead for Innovation Loans at Innovate UK.
And Hugh, please. I'm going to confuse it. We're going to know that. Hugh, please.
No problem. So my name's Hugh Minnock. I started my career at Barclays actually. Now work at Foresight Group. We manage £12 billion of money, 1.2 billion of which is invested in UK SMEs, a portfolio of 200 companies. And we also manage part of the Midlands Engine Fund, as well as some early stage funds such as the Foresight Williams Fund, which is a time with Williams advice.
Thank you, and Jamie, apologies.
So I'm Jamie, I'm a partner at YFM Equity Partners. We're a poor person compared to Foresight, so we only have 440 billion of management invested across 48 businesses in the UK. That's my full-time job. I'm here for that, but I'm also here because I'm on the steering committee for the Archangels Group, which is a very fledgling angels network supporting businesses within that golden arc between Oxford and Cambridge.
Thank you. And Dolores, please.
Hi, I'm Dolores Sanders. I'm one of the founding directors, strategic director of Total Control Pro. We are a manufacturing operations platform to help manufacturers survive and thrive in the digital world.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Colin, McGrory, Technical Director at Sandwell. We're a surface engineering company, so we just play with the surface materials. We just make things last longer, or stronger, or make them look pretty, or protect them from things like electricity.
Right, thank you. Maxi, if I come to you first, thank you for an excellent presentation. I guess what I'm really interested in is how is funding an innovative business different from a normal commercial lend? What are the differences and what do you have to look out for?
I suppose innovation is really, really risky, and you know, there's a lot of money could go in when businesses success. These innovative businesses, when they're successful, it's great, but there can be huge losses on that front. And the way we look at things at Innovate UK, I mean, we've been doing that for a long time. We really, really understand innovation risk, and the way we go about it are we've been looking at grants and the like. So when all these applications come through, sorry. So yeah, so when these applications start coming through all these different programs, we need to have that way of defining, you know, what is the innovation, where's the risk, which are the ones that we want to fund. Yes, they're grants, but we want these businesses to succeed. And there's probably, you know, the thousands and thousands of applications. The way they're assessed is around the innovation risk. We have independent assessors that are very, very good at judging that innovation risk. And what we also do, so when we're looking at the loans, we need to look at the debt and the suitability of that business to take on a loan. And so in those instances, we're looking at innovation risk, we're looking at the suitability of the business to take on the loan, and the sort of repayment side. And where it differs slightly to how the banks may look at things, I suppose we've got to look at future projections. Banks tend to and you know, look at that track record, what's happened in the past. We really focus our research, our analysis, our evaluations on what are the projections looking like. And yes, we're used to hockey stick, and it's about assumptions. So I suppose really what we want to do is look at those future projections. What's that innovation quality? So we score that innovation, we give that an innovation score, and we're looking at that overall before we make that decision.
Thank you, thank you. So I guess that we often see equity finance as a route to support some of those innovative businesses. So if I can come to Hugh and Jamie, Hugh first, explain what equity investment is for us, and why do you typically look for innovation and technology in a business when you're investing?
Yes, good question. So equity, different to debt in that the objective of a debt provider is to get their money back plus some interest. Equity funding is much more like a partnership going on a journey with someone. The time frame is more open-ended. The equity investor is taking a stake in the business, and the business founder and the equity investor should be aligned on that journey of creating value for shareholders. Why is technology and innovation important for an equity investor? Well, the equity investor needs to see a business that's going to grow. It doesn't necessarily have to have huge commercial traction now, but it has to have the potential to generate that commercial traction. And where will that sustainable competitive advantage come from? Typically, that's from some sort of technology or innovative process.
Thank you. Jamie, is that the same for YFM? Why do you invest in those technologies and those innovations?
It's exactly the same. For us, we compete a lot on investments.
That's why we separate.
So why do we like innovation and technology? So we're a risk reward investor, which is what equity is. So we start at the end. So we look at something that arrives with us. We see about 1,000 opportunities a year, and we're trying to 10. And we look at how big could this be in the future, and what are the risks for us to get there with the team, and how much money it's going to need. And then we're quite the things that are really innovative and have a big moat, because technology can provide you with a moat, the chances of this thing being very, very big at the end is much higher than perhaps if you haven't got technology and innovation behind you to support it.
Thank you. And you raised, I think, Central Rock Angels and your involvement in that. Can you explain to the audience a little bit about how angel investment is slightly different probably to the day job, and maybe angel investments are that first level of risk capital?
Yeah, so in our day jobs, we're both the same this, we raise money from other people, and we raise that on a mandate to do something. So we tell our investors we are going to go invest in businesses that look a bit like this, and that does then restrict us to doing that thing with that pot of money. With angel investors, they're investing their own money, so they can do what they like. They tend to be a bit more risk tolerant, higher risk, higher reward, they tend to be much earlier. They tend to be investing for other reasons. So I'm a professional fund manager in my day job. My job is to generate a return. We do that by creating great businesses, but my fundamental job is to get back more money to our investors. And they give us, for angels, they'll invest for reasons they think they can add value. They want to grow business in their region. It's something they're interested in spending their time in. So it tends to be different risk reward profile.
And apologies, Jamie, because I'm probably going off tack a little bit, but I'm conscious that we're getting logged a little bit on this. But tax reliefs, angel investors, can you explain a little bit about why it's advantageous for them to do that?
Yeah, so not being political, but the UK has the most tax advantaged environment in Europe for early stage investing, both for individuals and for funds like the ones we manage, VCT funds. As an individual angel, you can benefit from something called the SEIS tax relief and EIS tax relief, which gives you some great tax back. So for every £1 you invest, you get a percentage of that back against your tax return in a year. It also offsets some of your losses if they don't go very well, and part of your return is tax free. So it is super. I mean, if anybody's doing investing, you should definitely be looking at SEIS and EIS wrappers. And I would say the ecosystem in the UK over the last 10 years since I've been doing this has massively changed because of the way that those rules are set to encourage investing in early stage businesses.
Thank you, that's a great description, thank you. Dolores, welcome, and thank you so much for offering to be on the panel. Really interested to know a little bit more about Total Control Pro, how important innovation technology has been to the growth of the business, and maybe how you funded that growth and innovation technology.
Certainly, well, I'm at risk of being a kind of a voice for everyone else so far. You know, first of all, innovation is what we do. You know, the niche that we can carve out is going between legacy, old technology, and what's required, and especially in the area of manufacturing, we know that the pressure to do more, make more, waste less. Technology and innovation in that area is the only way that everyone is going to succeed. So it's at the core of everything we do. To fund that, I mean, let's start from the beginning. The funding was pure sweat equity. You know, it was 2 founders, myself and my husband, 2 developers, still working full time, putting, you know, long nights in developing a product, testing it, not knowing where the market was. And I suppose we got our first real traction when we linked up with what was actually a KTN run program called Manufacturing 4. And that was about really helping manufacturers adopt that Industry 4. Believe it or not, back in 2016, they're still going, or we're still going. The KTN partner was really about us helping to position our product and position our growth where we could see that through lots of things we could do, because we got excited about we could do this, we could do this technology, etc. So they helped to really kind of refine where we were going with our innovation. And that started to then signpost, right, if you go here, then this funding will come, and this funding. So actually, from the real outset, we knew that at certain growth gates or development gates or new project gates, what funding was going to be there. I mean, for me, I identified in 2016, talking to one of the Women in Innovation Award winners at an event that the KTN held, knew that award would be available. It didn't come back as funded till kind of 4 years later, but I knew that's where I wanted to go to help with our profiling. We were one of the founding, or I think just after the pilot on the innovation loans, I think just the second round. So we're now into just at the end of our commercialisation period. Now, it's been a bit uncomfortable the last 2 years that haven't had them kick in. So, you know, through a development and helping our customers do that. Absolutely spot on. It helped us to raise equity funding. You know, we tried both. We went both roads. We went through looking for VC and angel. We went for angel funding in the end because I think as a startup and an innovation company, it is essential. Actually, Hugh said it. You've got to be aligned. So you've got a business plan, you've got a direction, and you've got innovation. You can't always explain to every, you know, some of the angels, they come in and they kind of know it's something exciting, but they don't understand underneath it, but they know where you're going and they can take you there. So you have to choose the right funding for that. And now we are, we then went to our second stage funding where we actually brought in both some equity investment and we went through crowdfunding. That was highlighted and signposted us through our scale-up program with the EDGE team. So Richard, I'll give you a shout out before you come up. But they very much helped us identify what's next. I think the real take home for that is I started my first business at 20 and we just went straight out into the equity market, raised a lot of money. The business didn't succeed, you know, that's the way it went. But actually the Innovate process invested in us and what we've done, but also the understanding of where we're going and helped us decide to really pull all that together. And we've got to do what's right for the company.
Okay. And learn along the way, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Colin, let's come back to you then. Can I ask you the same question in terms of Sandwell? You know, talk to me a little bit about the innovation technology, how important it was for the business, and maybe how you funded some of that innovation technology, please.
Well, I'm a big fan of Innovate UK because we've had Innovate funding for really, how long has it been going?
Used to be called the Technology
Yeah,
Board, so a long time.
So probably 10 years we've been using Innovate funding, and it's great because it's for us it's 70% of our costs really. So in terms of technology, we've had some good projects on the go. And we work with Catapult Centre, we work with the NTC Coventry, and I was trying to think back of the sort of relevance of some of the projects, and we did one called NanoP, which is firing sort of steel balls at materials, very high velocity, and you convert the brain structure to a nanostructure, which has great advanced properties. But one of the pieces of kit that we needed for that was residual stress measuring equipment, which is a laser spectral system. And actually through Innovate, we were able to buy them, like £80,000. So you wouldn't normally just go out and buy them. But, and I was thinking on Tuesday, we had a major aerospace company give my presentation to them as you do. And I said, oh, by the way, we can actually measure residual stress. You know, we've got our own sort of stress measuring equipment. There's only 4 of these units in the UK, you know, and 2 are in universities. So, and they were like, could you do this? Could you do that? Yeah. You know, so that kickstart from like 5 years ago when we thought we could really do with this equipment, you know, really continues to sort of promote the company. And that's been really good, you know. And at the moment, we're doing a project with Innovate and Catapult Centre on using additive manufacturing and trying to improve the surface finish, and at the same time reduce the level of stress in the plant. So again, with Innovate, we sort of bought some big equipment and we're shaking parts in full of ceramic balls. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that. We've done sort of more thermometer mapping areas. But again, you know, without Innovate, we wouldn't even be able to start that. And without Catapult Centre as well, having their expertise, you know, there's no way that we could progress through the project as well. So yes, it's been good for us.
That's really good. Thank you for that. So all good, Hemaxi. Perfect. Innovate UK are great. But I'm very conscious there are lots of finance options there, and maybe other businesses may not be as fortunate to know where to go to. So talk to me about how Innovate UK helps businesses find the options and work with them. I'm guessing increasing it's a blend of options available.
Definitely. So we've obviously got the grants, we've got the sort of the debt finance, there's the equity finance. It's about getting that sort of mix. But there's just so much out there, so much that you may not know. And I'm sure, you know, for these guys, it took a while to find those different sort of support areas. The really fabulous thing is now we're working as much more of an Innovate UK family. So we've got Innovate UK EDGE, we've got Innovate UK KTN, and the catapults. And the starting point would be to speak to one of the Innovate UK EDGE advisors, because they will know whether it's a little bit about a lot of things or some real specific areas, and can signpost to those right support areas, but also help you with the scaling up of your business. But as I said, Richard's your expert on that, and he'll tell you a lot more. But we're trying to make the process as easy as possible, and we're working on new websites where you can put in that you want a grant or you want a debt finance or equity, and where it will signpost you to the right areas. We're not quite there on that yet, but that should be launching very soon. But we've got that sort of family there that can really support and take you through that process. And our website is absolutely fabulous. There's a lot of information on there for the background, and a really good customer support team as well.
If I come back to Jamie and Hugh, I'm going to pick your brains a little bit here. Both myself and Max, I think we talked about those regional disparities and differences, and I know we all talked recently on this. Tell me a little bit about what you're experiencing. Is this region, it's between Oxford and Cambridge, but is it a region that is well served by equity and angel investors? Is there more work to be done? Could we do some more work in that respect, Jamie?
Yeah, so there's things here. I don't think there's enough funding focused on here. I know there's the Midlands engine, but that's quite a big patch. Archangels was set up to try and fill this gap, because they're what we call the brain drain to Oxford, Cambridge and London, and this is a commuter place, really, this whole region. So I live around the corner in Leighton Buzzard, and inevitably gets up in the morning and walks down to the train station, gets the train to London, and that's very common, and maybe that's not a problem, but it feels like there's a missed opportunity, and that I don't quite know how we solve the chicken and egg of having more early stage startup businesses here before the funding gets here, or the funding gets here, and then that creates the early stage startup businesses. I don't think there is enough here, but I don't know which part of that gets solved first. There is shed loads of money. We talked about a couple of things today. It's like a small microcosm of how much money there is available. And things like this are all great, but there's things like this everywhere. But I don't quite know who has to take responsibility for just pushing this region as a good place to start business. There's definitely more to be done.
Right. I know Hugh, Foresight to increasingly become a regional funder. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you just stay in the Shard in London?
Yeah, well, the Shard is great. We had a fire drill yesterday, but it was awful. But why do we go out into the regions? Because I think it's an underserved part of the market, and that's where we can find really exciting businesses. I think Jamie's completely right. You know, we have an office in Cambridge, and you can see the Cambridge ecosystem. A lot of money has come there. There's the critical mass of the university. There's a lot of exciting ideas coming out. Equally, if you look at the East Midlands, places like Cranfield, Nottingham University, producing a lot of really exciting businesses. I met a business on the South Coast who we're talking about investing in. They're actually opening an office in Nottingham to get access to the amazing electrical engineering department there. I'm invested in another business in Wiltshire, which is a UAV business. They talk about Cranfield all the time because of the amazing technologies that are coming out here. So I think having more money in the region will help, but I think it's also what Jamie's identified, those grassroots organisations that you see in the Cambridges and the Oxfords that are going to help draw in further attention.
That's great, thank you. Maxi, very quickly come back to you. You just opened, I think you just closed a new round of innovation loans, haven't you, from recollection? Tell us about what's hot in innovation at the moment. Are you getting trends? Are there particular areas that you're getting lots of applications from?
So the fabulous thing with innovation loans is that we are, now that we're out there, we've got a business as usual products, you know, the interest and the level of applications is just going up and up and up. But when we're looking at generally all our competitions, whether that's grants and all of these programs are designed based on the need for on that public need, and we sort of rooted through what government really feels. So at the moment now with the you know, the net zero, the future economy, all those things that I've been talking about, that is the focus for Innovate UK, and that is where a lot of our competitions will stem from, and from those particular areas.
Thank you. I'll come back to Colin and Dolores. It seems you've learned some lessons along the way in terms of funding journeys. If we've got companies in the audience both now and virtually as well, what guidance would you give to them in terms of making sure that they spend time productively on putting applications together and speak to the right people? What would be your tips in terms of building those relationships and getting the right funding, Colin?
I think within this, it is a competition. So you have to really understand what you want to do, why you want to do it. You have to be totally driven. Because, you know, we failed in the past to get funding. But when you do, it's actually a very strict regime now with monitoring officers as to how you're performing through that project. But I think the Innovate Labs and a lot of the other sort of learning systems is quite interesting, because like the project one at the moment, if we have to scale that, suddenly you need, you know, £300,000-400,000 to sort of fund it. So it's quite nice that I have no idea. I don't know much about finance, so I didn't realise so many opportunities, I guess. So I think it's something we'll look into.
Dolores, lessons learned, hints and tips.
Well, in terms of the sort of grant and innovation thing is, there is lots there, and actually there's a lot available. So don't feel you have to chase everything. Choose the right ones that align with the business that you're doing, because you can get drawn into one you're thinking, well, we just, you know, it'll be some funding and that would be useful to do. But actually it takes your resources, and when you are an SME, you've only got that number of resources, and you're suddenly doing a project that's really not taking you in the right direction. So, you know, do cherry pick, do choose the right ones. Have a couple of people, we have a couple of really great people who help signpost us inside of, I talked about KTN and that side who help to signpost it. So foster those relationships, because they will help to say, we've seen this is coming up, we think it'd be right down your street, or this is happening. But choose wisely, and then when you do go for those funding and you do get those projects, we did a project last year with the digital catapult, put everything into it. You know, don't try and just sideline it and think, well, we'll take the money, but we'll put the project. Put everything in, because that's when you really get not just the funds, but, you know, the real rewards.
Great. Thank you. So if I come back very quickly to Hugh and Jamie, we've talked a lot about innovation technology, but that's not the everything, is it? So when you're looking at propositions, what other things are you looking at over and above just innovation technology in order to invest there? So maybe Hugh first, please.
I think just building on Dolores' comment there, it's that be choosy and cherry pick point. People can get very carried away that here's some capital and I'm going to work with them. Like I was saying earlier, it's a relationship you're building, it's a partnership. You're going on what could be quite a long journey together. Selecting that right partner could make your life a lot easier. And we definitely look at the product and the technology, but we also look at people. And I would encourage you to do the same. Just build a relationship with the people if you're going to go on a 5-year plus journey with them.
Thank you. And Jamie, please.
So it was interesting hearing your stories, coming out with a product you didn't know where the market was. And as an investor, we tend to, that market thing is really important for us. It's part of the reason why we're not innovators, we're just doing finances. But just the key thing for us is how big is this opportunity to making the world's best widget that 3 people are going to want isn't going to be an investable business. Unfortunately, it might be the best widget, but that's not what people are going to buy. And how do you turn that innovation into a product that sells for a lot of money is a key thing for us. And then, as you said, people, you can, if you have a bad product and a bad market, but great people, you stand a chance. If you have people that perhaps are wrong and then the wrong product and the great product and the great market, you tend not to have as much of a chance. just back to a question of funding, it's something that always strikes me that smaller businesses, if you had a legal problem, you go and talk to a lawyer, and if you had a manufacturing problem, you talk to somebody to tell you about manufacturing. But when it comes to finance, everybody thinks they've got to sort it themselves, and yet there is a massive professional services industry that is very happy to help, and they charge you for it in the same way as lawyers would charge you for it. And I sometimes worry that entrepreneurs and founders spend a lot of time thinking about funding and less time thinking about the product. So definitely bang for the buck of, is the 5 hours I'm going to spend trying to find some funding a good use of 5 hours, or should I actually find a trusted advisor? I'm going to pay them some money, but they'll be able to source that market really quickly for me and tell me where I should be going. I'd encourage people to find that who's in your local region who understands where money comes from, pay for the advice in the same way as you would for legal advice, HR advice.
So we've got a virtual audience, and just to prove the point, they'll be firing questions. And I often ask this as a cheeky question, so I'm going to ask it now before we wrap up. So with equity investors, they're going to take my baby away from me, or words to that effect. Okay, but let's talk about positively how you add value, particularly in terms of board involvement, NEDs. So let's get some balance into that question a little bit. Jamie, first, please.
Yeah, so I'll take the negative bit first. So us taking your baby away, we don't know how to run businesses. We're financiers. We've never done the things that you do. So the idea that we're going to come in and tell you how to run your business, it's at this end of the market, that's not what happens. Maybe at the multi-billion-dollar buyout end, that is what happens. I can't comment on that. But just go and get, that is a preconception. Pick some companies from pick some portfolios from our website, companies we're invested in already. Pick up the phone to the founder of that business and ask what really happened, and you get comfortable very quickly. That any credible organisation who's been around for more than a few years won't do that. You don't survive very long. On the positive side, what do we do? YFM's been investing for 40 years, so there's no magic playbook that we do the Tadar moment. There's nothing like that, but there's a lot of lessons learned across all sorts of sectors and industries. There's 40, I think we've got 48 in the portfolio right now. We bring all of that collective knowledge into the centre of YFM and send it back out to all of our portfolio companies around best practice, shortcuts, seeing around corners. If you want to open an office in some random state in the US, we've probably done that before. So us sitting there, it won't be us that's done it, but we could say that I don't know why you want to open up in this state, but I know somebody who has, so let's get them in and have that conversation about what we can learn from them to then make sense.
And again, Hugh, just to follow on from that, involvement on boards, appointment of NEDs, can you just expand on that a little bit for us?
Sure, I think Jamie framed it perfectly there. We're going to hear about YM3D later. We're never going to teach that business how to build better products or sell better services. But we do have a lot of experience through our portfolio of the patterns we've seen of successful businesses and what they've done. I think some of the ways we try and contribute is by appointing directors to the board of that business, and they can act as guides, mentors, sounding boards to the executive team as they try and deliver on the business plan. And I think one of the valuable things we bring is that network of non-executives who want to work with our portfolio companies, who have scars on their back, grey hairs, they've made mistakes, they've learned a lot along the way, and they want to invest a bit of their money, go on a journey with this company and help it be successful. And as investors, as I said, we spend a lot of time making sure we're aligned with you. We spend a lot of our time for our portfolio companies thinking about how can we make them more successful? How can we help them? Is that encouraging them to hire more people into the team, to delegate more out to the team that they have? There's all sorts of contributions we can make, but if we've got our alignments right, we're all pointing in the right direction, which will be in a constructive manner.
Thank you.
Lewis, if I can just say as well and answer that question. Yes, it takes one to have a baby, but there is also a phrase that takes a village to raise a child. I think from an SME's perspective, from a startup perspective, if those in startup actually got that, nothing belongs to them if they hold on to it. The only way we can actually get the regional growth is for that collaboration, is for that sharing of ideas, but also allowing others to invest in your business. You can then go and invest in others. So it is an ecosystem, And I think a lot of startups could look a bit closer at how closely or how tightly they think they're holding on to innovation.
You've done my job for me. I'll come back to you. So just finally, before we wrap up the first session, if I come back to my three business people on the panel, what does the future hold for the business, and would you take funding again, or do you think you're going to take funding again? So Dolores, Tech Control Pro, what's the future hold?
Yeah, absolutely. We are focused on growth. You know, funding will come in either for new innovation and moving our product itself on, or even to look at acquisition for market growth and that side of things as well. But we, you know, we're absolutely committed to UK manufacturing. That's the massive growth area. And yeah, growth is in our future.
Cool. That's good news. And Colin?
Yeah, I mean, we're planning to grow quite a lot, and it's quite hard when you see the media, the way this gets played out in the economy. We don't see, in manufacturing and engineering, we don't see any signs of that whatsoever. You know, we're as busy as ever. And even feels like areas like oil and gas, you know, we do some oil and gas work, and that is massive at the moment. You know, nothing to do with the oil price, I'm sure. But every aspect of our business, we work, you know, it's medical, so prosthetics, that side of things. We work on supercars, we work in F1, we work with aerospace, we work with marine, every area. And I think it's partly, you know, materials are being developed, new technologies, and that drives the sort of new components, the new engines, and the whole new technology. And for us, there's massive growth. Yeah, absolutely.
And funding required to do that?
Certainly, yeah. So I think the next 3 years for us is quite significant.
Right, that's good news. That's good news. I'm conscious we're running slightly over, so we may have time for one question before we break, but you will have an opportunity to speak to all the panellists during that break. If you'd like to raise your hand if you have a question, don't be shy and introduce yourself. So,
Hi, I'm Phil from Easy Charge. We're just going through, we've gone through seed funding and raised 1.1 million. We're now looking at Series A to go to 3 million fundraise. And Hugh and Jamie touched on it, but there are about thousands of VC funds out there that you can go to. Should we spend our time going direct and trying to find the funds that match our business? Or, as Jamie suggested, should we go through an M&A, give them some money and let them go and find the right funds for us? What's the best approach? Is it direct or is it through an expert?
Great question. Great question.
So different people, different views. For me, the finding the right partner is that much of getting the money. So at the time we complete a transaction, there's going to be 1,000 pages on the table and you're going to have to be comfortable with them all. Having the right advisor with you as you go through that process will give you a much better outcome at the end, and you'll be much more comfortable with it. So for me, I would always say get an advisor alongside you who can help you do that. You will also get a better commercial transaction as well, because they will run a bigger process. They'll talk to more of the right people to create. They'll make us compete against each other and push the pricing up. So I admire founders who try and do it, but I don't think it's a good use of time.
Yeah, I think just to help you understand, I guess, how we as investors see companies raising their Series A. I think there's a lot of people who, obviously, if you're founding a business, you're very self-reliant, and you go on the internet and you see Sequoia have told you, put on their website, big Silicon Valley investor, here's how to put together the perfect pitch deck. So you put it together and you read a lot of case studies of people in the Valley who fired off 1,000 pitch decks, and then they heard back from this many VCs and raised the money. That does seem to work in the Valley. I would say in the UK, again, Jamie referenced, we see a lot of business plans, but we have relationships with the advisory community. If someone just emails you cold a pitch deck, you'll kind of open it and flick it through, and if it's not clear, you've never met this person before and they just cold emailed you, maybe I fire off a question, maybe I don't. If it's an advisor who I've known for 10 years and who shows us quality companies consistently, they'll help you work up your pitch deck. They'll also introduce you on a human level. And ultimately, as you all know, people do business with people. And if you had a chance for a big commercial contract worth 10 million of revenue, you wouldn't send someone a deck of slides and then see if they come back to you in 2 weeks and send a chaser email. You go see them in person, you try and build relationships with them and people they have relationships with. So yeah, echoing Jamie's point, I think the advisory community adds a huge amount of value.
I can see a couple of people putting shuffling in their chairs at the moment. So I'm going to stop there if that's okay, because we're running out of time. We've got final innovation, and again, there's been much trials in that earlier panel around actually taking support and accessing that support, almost the precursor to funding, but during that funding journey as well. So really delighted to introduce Richard from Innovate.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Not an easy task to follow Lewis and the British Business Bank talking about all the wonderful resources you have at your disposal, and then actually talking about the amazing funding opportunities you've got with Innovate UK. So it's about following the Rolling Stones on stage, actually. But I'm going to do my best. So I am Richard Carey-Evans. I'm a Senior Innovation Advisor at Innovate UK EDGE. I'm based in the St John's team in Cambridge. So we look after the east of England. So we just about, this covers this part of the world. I am about to cardinal sins. The companies I work with, I always tell them, I'm the first one for an investment pitch, for a sales pitch, always knock them dead. Grab attention, get them engaged, and just wait for it. Okay. This very much links into Hemaxi, what her presentation, the end part of it. And this idea that, it's not an idea, it's a fact that we are now a family. And this is the world we live in, the ecosystem we live in terms of, up here sitting at the top is the ministry, is BAYS, the research councils that feed into BAYS. Innovate UK feeds into the research council and vice versa. And then Innovate UK is split into Hemaxi and the funding and the loans support that goes on there. And then on the other side of the circle is the, I guess I call it the business support, the resources outside that funding that exist to help a business grow and scale. This is Innovate UK EDGE. I'm actually talking about catapults. And then we've got KTN, Innovate UK KTN as well. And then Innovate UK EDGE, where I am, we're about 270 advisors across the UK. Our backgrounds are generally we've worked in business. In my background, I lived in Madrid for 20 plus years, ran a sustainable construction business, digital marketing business. Also, I've sort of been beaten up, I've been kicked, I've run, I've jogged, and so moved back to the UK about 5 years ago, worked for VIT for my sins, and then I joined Innovate UK EDGE with the St John's team in Cambridge around about 2 years ago. So that is the ecosystem. What we do, why do we exist? There are three cornerstones of what we do. Number one is to make sure that the innovation that you develop is that you can exploit it. That it's not just sitting in a drawer or in someone's mind, or that it's actually, if it's a runner, that we can help you make it work. To help you make it work, one of the key areas is obviously to help you source funding. We guide you with Innovate UK funding and loans. Also, we try and be as linked as we possibly can with the equity, with the funders, with the investors and the angel networks. Then the other thing that we do is we are very keen to enter new markets, but really we want you to internationalise. We want you to have a global perspective in what you're doing. So we, in my background, I work with VIT for a while, for international businesses, what I've always done. So that we put that at your disposal. Right, who's eligible for this? Really, the key thing is that you've got to be around about TRL 5, 6, that's 7. That's really where we're trying to join sort of help you. You need to have got past pre-seed, needs to be a bit of money in the business to be able to push yourselves forward. Ideally, if you're in the market, we're looking at some annual growth. Now this doesn't apply to anyone, but up to 500 employees. That's sort of sort of slightly different world. And one of the key thing is, we're happy to work with you, but you need to be willing to make a little bit of room for us in your day, or in your week, or in your month, for us to work with you. So there needs to be a desire to work with us. So that is the eligibility. Right, there are two gears to what we do. 90-something% of it is the high growth support. That's generally speaking those businesses that are growing at 20%. They've gone past seed fund, pre-seed, and we will work with you for between 5, 7, 10 days over a period of about a year. We're a resource for you to help you grow. Identify your obstacles, help you identify your opportunities, and achieve them. So that's the first part of that sort of road where we work with you. Then there are companies then that then actually are scaling at a far greater rate than that sort of high growth support. So once you've gone past that early stage and you're going at 50%, you're taking on 50 people, perhaps you've just taken on £5 million of funding. Those are different sorts of problems, the sorts of problems that we deal with at high growth. So we've got a scale-up team, which is actually growing quite quickly, of scale-up directors. And what we do is we would arrange a meeting. Some scale-up directors would come and have a chat to you, work out if your company was eligible, and then they would select a team of scale-up directors that suited the problems that you're facing. And they would sort of almost be almost like a sort of a board of advisors to work with you. It's not time bound. It's just there for you as you need it. So that's an increasing part of the Innovate UK EDGE service. What I would say as well is, we don't like to turn away anybody. So if you're not at TRL 5 or 6, and you haven't got pre-seed, I will always try and guide you somewhere, do some work with you. There was a company the other day that a circular economy company creating a platform, quite early stage. There wasn't much I could do with them, but what I did was I got them in touch with KTN, actually, Innovate UK KTN, and they've got a circular economy specialist that's going to help them find out which market they should be focusing on, because it's a very diverse market. So we'll always help you if we can. Right, the process. We meet you. We've got a diagnostic tool that we use called Growth Mapper. We also have an initial meeting where we identify where your problems are, where your opportunities may lie. We create an action plan, and we work with you on that action plan. That action plan will evolve. We'll work with you for sort of 12 months, 18 months potentially. That action plan will evolve. We'll solve that full problem, and as we go along, we'll identify something else. But it's continuous. And what we do as well, we do like to try and collect data now. We're a government, it's government funded, so we do like to understand how much you've grown, the achievements you've made, and record them. I think some also had COVID last week, and that's a good time. Over me a second.
He has tested negative, by the way.
Yes,
Just in case you want to think that.
I think it's falling asleep. So good. All right, so that's the process. In terms of delivery, it's funny, some of my kids say, "What do you do that?" Is it coaching? Is it mentoring? Is it advising? It's all of those things, really. It's a shoulder to cry on, a punch bag, a psychologist. We get strategic. We look at value propositions. We try and identify target markets. Try and help the business understand the value of what they're doing. It's very broad, and it's very bespoke. So whatever your particular needs are,
we will create that action plan and the work that we do with you around that. Now then, in terms of specifics, there are lots of specific resources that we've got. So sometimes I want to sort of try and live up to Innovate UK here a little bit. We've got the Catapult grants, which are, these are £15,000 grants that will allow you to work with a catapult that you may use for a little to do some prototyping work, to do some market research, whatever your requirement is with the catapult, we can fund £15,000 of that. A lot of the work we do is around about investment readiness. So it's to sort of wean you away from the grant funding world and take you into the private commercial world. We run a program called PitchFest, which is about to be rebranded. PitchFest is a national program for investment readiness to help you prepare yourself to pitch to investors, to make you able to sit down in a room and make sense to an investor. That program's been running for a while now. The last two programs we've run, the companies that we've worked with have raised £40 million. So, you know, it's very effective. It will come back online quite shortly. So that is a big part of what we do. I mean, as on an individual basis, you know, I'm always looking to build relationships with, you know, I met Jamie here this morning. Hugh, I know Hugh's colleague, Cambridge, Bill, really awesome. So I always try and, if I find a company that's working in a certain sector, I'll try and marry them with an investor that I know is looking for companies and innovations in that area. So there's a lot of connectivity that goes around this. We've got Design for Growth, which is, it's on the soft side of things. It's a very common problem. Oops, sorry, I'm running out of time there, sorry. Design for Growth is very specific mentoring over a 3-month period. You know, the sort of problems that can solve is a company that might be a hardware company that has to create a user interface on a software platform. They've got no idea what they're doing. There's some specific mentoring that can solve those sort of problems. The brand architecture of a business, sometimes I work with business, they've got brands everywhere, they've got, it's crazy, very hard to understand what they're doing. So there's specific mentoring we can provide with, that's done with the Scallop Institute as well. We've got IP audits. These are great tools. There's not many of them around at the moment. So patience, these are, you can work with the IP professional you choose, and they will carry out an audit of the business to understand what you need to be thinking about regards your IP. You know, that can be as broad as that, or it can be as specific as I had one the other day that I'm working with at the moment. That is, they want a license, and they want to understand what they need to understand about their business and to take into account to license their technology. That's also now very cleverly been followed up with an IP access grant. So you can have the audit, which is great, that tells you what you need to know, and the IP access grant is the £5,000 grant that actually allows you to start to implement those recommendations from the IP professional. So that's a great one. We've got peer-to-peer groups. These are, again, with the Scallop Institute, regional basis, getting 15 like-minded people, business leaders together, a really useful tool. All the feedback, all the companies I work with that have been on peer-to-peer groups, love it. Once a month, people used to complain, oh, I haven't got the time to go and meet visiting, but they love it. Once you're on it, people don't want to lose it. Those are a little bit like parking slots, the peer-to-peer group. When a slot becomes available, you've got to jump on it. So, you know, if you're interested in one of those slots, then speak to your advisor and they can get you in. Running plenty of events, global innovation programs. That's funded overseas visits to a cluster. They're sector specific. That can be clean tech to New York. There's one at the moment, agri-tech to New Zealand. It's completely all sectors you can imagine. They're fully funded and they're very effective ways of getting yourself into a new market. Right, there we go. I'm going to rush through. I think I'm done, I think. Oh, okay, the key thing. You know, we don't just do this for fun. There needs to be outputs to this. These are some of the results from, this is just me patting us on the back.
These are the results from East of England over the last 2 years. We've worked with just under 1,500 companies. Huge amounts of investment being raised by those companies, jobs created, turnover increased. So that's a little bit about the results of what we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. If I could ask you to take a seat with the other panellists. So can I ask the second panel panelist to arrive? We've got a spare seat, and sadly we've got a spare seat because Chris Horton from Performance Project was due to join us. Unfortunately, he didn't test negative this morning, and we can't get the virtual connection to work properly. And it would be unfair of Chris to have him on the panel. So we are one missing, but I know the other panelists are going to speak either very slowly or answer longer. Either way, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. So if I can, in the same manner, if I can ask the panelists to introduce yourself. Richard, maybe I'll start with you. Can you reintroduce yourself?
Yes, okay. So I'm Richard Carey-Evans, Innovate UK EDGE, based in Cambridge. Cover this area as well. And I've been with Innovate UK for 2 years. Previously, worked at BIT. Previously, I was in Madrid, doing all sorts of funny things.
Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, my name is Jason Stark, and I work in the Research and Enterprise Office at Carey-Evans University. I'm a bit of a last-minute substitute. My colleague, Denise Cascade, who you know, unfortunately she's got COVID, so get me today.
You're very welcome, Jason. You're very welcome. Graham, please.
Yeah, hi, Graham Clark, partner of Strathclyde. We work in the automotive industry. We basically core business is managing suppliers and growing their business in the UK. That's our traditional area. Been doing it since 1960, so I like to think we're pretty good at it. But while I'm here today, I'm working with innovation companies through Plug and Play. Plug and Play is the largest innovation platform in the world. In the Silicon Valley, just opened a UK office a few weeks ago with Jaguar Land Rover. And they're inviting companies to present their new technologies. We've been working with them for about 5 years, and our business really is to help them land projects in the T1s, the automotive suppliers. So that's what we do.
Thank you. And finally, Flaminia.
Flaminia Martina, Chief Executive Officer and one of the co-founders of WAM 3D Limited. We are a Cranfield University spin-off company. I spent over 10 years in the shed there, developing this technology. We are now in Milton Keynes. We are only 3 years old, but we've got customers all over the world. And what we do is the largest and the quickest metal 3D printers in the world for high integrity structural components for sectors such as aerospace, marine, oil and gas, and space.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists for this morning's session. So Richard, if I can come back to you a little bit, you're obviously working with a lot of local businesses across the patch. Give us a feel for the types of issues, questions, requests that you're being asked by those businesses, particularly around innovation support. Are there any trends that you've experienced?
I mean, the big issue that everyone, almost everyone has, is raising money. That is a very big one, and how we try and help them doing that, obviously through the UK funding there, also introducing them to investors that would be interested in sort of working with them. But outside the financial side of things, you know, often what I find is that there are lots of companies that have got an innovation and they can't quite work out what their market is. So that is a big part of the work that we do, to try and help them work out, you know, where should I be putting my eggs to take this to market, and as well understand the value of what they're doing, what it is they have. So yeah, so I'll actually sort of would like to go on a bit here, but the other side of things is often, you know, you're working with quite technical people, and you know, they're fantastic, very clever, but they haven't thought about the softer side of things, about the marketing. You know, you created this, but you haven't thought about how you're going to let people know about it. It's great that you know about it and your close circle, but you need to let other people know about this. So that's another area as well that is a common weakness that we work with.
Thank you. Jason, if I come to you, please. Universities are often quite rightly cited as drivers for innovation in the regions in terms of what they do. Can you just give us a feel for what typically universities provide businesses in terms of support? And please feel free to be very specific to Open University.
I guess there's three kinds of support that universities provide businesses. The first is access to knowledge and expertise. That's about academic. The second is access to the facilities at universities, like all of very expensive bespoke equipment. And the third is to work with businesses on funding applications, so things like KTPs or open grants, like that. So across the Sandwell region, I think there's 6 universities, and each of those universities kind of specialise in something slightly different. And so you basically choose a university that kind of specialises in what you might solve. So an example could be the University of Northampton. I think they provide an awful lot of support for business development, not just for staff and students, but also for businesses in the local region. Slightly differently is maybe like Cranfield University, where we've got a lot of lab equipment, which businesses generally can't afford to either buy themselves or just by buying. And so you look what you need and you target the university for that. For the Open University, we're a slightly different one, and usually when I go to events like this, I have to start off by telling people that we do research at university. Because we're so well known for distance learning, a lot of people don't realise we do research, but we do. And we've got a campus in Milton Keynes, about 10 miles that way, so we're Cranfield's noisy neighbours. And we've got about 1,000 academics, all based on that campus. And we cover a whole range of disciplines. We've got the STEM disciplines, we've got the arts, social sciences, the business and law. And so really what we can offer for businesses, about expertise, knowledge and equipment, can fall into any one of those remits. And so it could be a technical question or a technical challenge to the STEM department. It could be trying to develop some kind of new sustainable business model, which is our practice business and law offer. Alternatively, there are things like CPD, and the university provides an awful lot of training courses. Most of them are free, I'm hoping that. So it's what you want. You've got to target university. If you don't target university, you might think what can they do for me? We're just scratching the surface.
Universities are big organisations, we know that. So how can a business navigate its way through a university to get that great support that you've talked about? What's the routine and how do you engage businesses in the way?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I think universities have just as much trouble engaging businesses as businesses do universities. And as a university, we're looking at a very great increased amount of collaborative work that we can do. It's what we really want to do. And I think most universities do is try and solve that problem. All universities will have a tech transfer office, and that might cause something slightly different to each university. But at the university, we're the research and enterprise office. And we're a small team, but we're kind of the gateway into the university for businesses or people who want to work with us. And so our office is, we kind of have 3 general roles. The first bit is this kind of matchmaking role. If a business comes along, it's got a challenge, they talk to us. We should have a good knowledge of who in the university has got the expertise or resources they need. We can then approach that to people and over time introduce them to the business. So that's one of the roles. The second for the office that we work in is like we manage intellectual property general research. And we're always looking for businesses that can license it to. So again, if you see on our website, we've got some intellectual property that you might want, come to the tech transfer office. We're the people who are paid to have time to actually do the running around. We're the middlemen. I know an awful lot of people. I know a little bit, a lot, I think it's from university, but enough to meet people up. And I guess the final thing at universities, particularly the universities trying to work businesses, is just make little pots of money available to kickstart the relationship. Because I think it's a bit sad about it. A lot of things, you do need a bit of money to start a little partnership there. That might be for a piece of research, it might be some kind of knowledge consuming costs and stuff time. And so, you with a knowledge transfer voucher scheme, they can apply for up to 10k. And that would be really just a solid relationship to get it going. So I think if you want to work with the university, look for the tech transfer office or something and refer to it to people, because that's their job and they're there to help.
Great, thank you, Jason. Graham, welcome, and thank you for sitting on the panel. When we spoke, you mainly, well, you sort of focused, not primarily, but on the automotive industry a little bit. So what I'm really interested to know a little bit is how businesses of all sizes and shapes in that supply chain need to continuously innovate. Is that your experience? Do they innovate or die?
It comes from all levels, really, from customer expectations. The next guy is better than the last guy. Also, the OEMs need to keep up with the competition, so they have to constantly innovate, and that's driven by the supply chain as well. I mean, recently Nissan launched their EV360, so it makes sense just over there. That was £1 billion worth of investment. That's the single biggest investment outside Japan. That's great news for the Northeast, for the UK in general. JLR have just launched their open innovation strategy with plug and play, as I mentioned, and they're inviting companies to go and present new tech. Again, that's fantastic. So it's really interesting, in terms of the rate of change. In my career, it's the fastest I've ever seen. So you have to constantly innovate. And we're helping companies, I think you mentioned, loads of different eggs. Working with plug and play, there's literally hundreds of companies, but not every egg creates a chicken. And then that's how we can help by filtering and working with these companies to try and sort of get them a proof of concept and take that product to market. And that's the area that we're helping.
Okay. So let's just stay on supply chain for a little bit, because supply chain is an interesting thing at the moment, isn't it, for many reasons. Who's driving innovation in that supply chain? Is it the large OEMs, or is it small businesses, or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix of both, and it's actually quite complex at the moment. A lot of OEMs are trying to bring in-house sort of by acquiring companies or bringing sort of technology in-house, but they're also sort of this new working strategies. We're moving from producing parts to the digital age. A lot of new tech is software rather than actually producing products. So the OEMs are having to adapt. And as I said, the rate of change for that is quite impressive. So as I said, to all levels, really, there's not really one direction. There's lots of different ways to go.
Okay. And how does that small business fit into that supply chain? Are they able to innovate, or are they being led?
No, it works sort of in many different aspects. I mean, a small company, generally, if you're not producing parts, you might just sell a license for your software and you grow that way. It's just, and we've seen recently as well that if you've got a great idea, if it's really that good, actually you'll just get people who want to actually build their business models and try and sell it as quick as possible. So,
great. Sounds an obvious question for me, but welcome and thank you for being on the panel. But so, what role did innovation technology play in your business going forwards? But probably more importantly, what type of support did you access, when, and who from?
I think it's helpful to explain the framework in which we did and we still do research at Cranfield University, which I think is a bit original in the UK, but also abroad. If we consider the multidisciplinarity of AM, you understand that you've got to develop several different things in parallel to deliver ultimately what is a successful component to someone like Airbus or Boeing. So we had to develop the hardware, the software, also the foundational material science across a series of technology readiness, which obviously we start at one, which is when, as I like to say, you have an idea in the shower, which seems like a great idea, and they go all the way to 9, which is when something has been proven in anger on the ground. So we accessed at the university obviously a lot of EPSRC funds, as well as internal funding that Cranfield was making available. And when ideas have been proven, TRL 2 or 3, then is when we went to Innovate UK. I think that when I joined Cranfield in 2009, it was just changing from TSB to Innovate UK. And we've accessed a number of smartphones throughout the year. I can think of 3 at least at the university. And actually the other aspect of the framework for R&D was the collaborative nature of a program which is still going strong. It's called OneMat in which, again, because of the several disciplines that were involved, we brought in partners from inside the UK, both academic and industrial, so that each of us could work to their strengths. And within the UK ecosystem, we avoided duplication as much as possible, which I think in 3D printing is a big issue. There's a lot of stuff being repeated all over the place. And then what that did was creating a virtuous network of companies, organizations, and people that got experience working together already, so that when we went to Innovate UK to apply for funding, we already had a demonstrable track record of successful collaboration. In fact, the last Innovate UK grant that I was involved in as a Cranfield University academy was called RoboOne, and in RoboOne we had KUKA, Airbus Defence Space, Strathclyde, and eventually also ONE3D. And it's not by chance that our flagship industrial 3D printer is called RoboOne today, because the main deliverable of that Innovate grant was the first RoboOne version, the first prototype, which now is installed and available at Strathclyde in one of the catapult centres in Scotland, and on which we've been building more and more innovation in the last 3 years since we've spun out to make the machine better. At the moment, we are in another Innovate UK grant with another large UK PLC, and it's given us, I wouldn't say risk-free, but a more comfortable space to innovate and to then convince, in this particular case, such a large PLC that our technology was worth pursuing and implementing. And right now I'm negotiating a very large contract, a commercial contract with them. So we are very thankful to Innovate UK for the support made available to us.
We've got to stop thanking Innovate UK. I feel like I feel a little bit awkward at the moment.
Because it goes both ways.
Absolutely. But actually coming back a little bit in seriousness, it's a difficult question because you don't know what you don't know, but how important was it being part of sort of a university, in this case Cranfield University, to be able to access that wider support, particularly at the early stage? Probably much more difficult if you weren't in that environment, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we've been really lucky. I feel really privileged because obviously Cranfield is a special place to begin with obviously the aerospace heritage and the much closer connection to industry compared to other universities everywhere. What that gave us was the chance to demonstrate the viability of our technology directly in front of those industry that now are our customers. In fact, fun enough, it was because of the industry's pressure to create a commercial supply chain for our process that we now exist. And actually, in 2015-16, we were considering spinning out, actually licensing our technology using established industrial players and effectively decomposing the offer of IP in little packages, the software, the hardware, the material science, and the broader know-how on services. And eventually the companies told us that all of these ingredients were so important together in the same place that it was much better if we had spun out, and that's how ONE3D was eventually created. So the other aspect was, of course, the scale of the industrial lab that Cranfield has. If you've not had the chance to go to Building 46, eventually maybe through Leeds we can organize a tour one day. We still have the biggest 3D printer in the world over there, 10 meters long. That's something that only here you can find. And crucially, because of that pipeline of innovation and intellectual property agreements and options that we have as a spin-out, when we talk to companies but also investors, we can tell them we've got 15 years of history, we've spent 15 million quid of funding, but we've got another 10 years mapped out ahead of us in terms of industrial R&D, and that's priceless.
Thank you. It's a great journey. I get a sense sometimes that businesses can be a little bit reticent of accessing support, or dare I say, asking for it. Is that your experience? And if so, why do you think that's the case, and how can we overcome those barriers? So I'll probably start with Richard, then come on to the other two panelists. Richard.
Yeah, I think I don't think the problem is them not wanting to access the support. I think obviously the problem is they don't know about it. Because once they do know about it, generally speaking, it's very effective and very useful to them. So that is often a problem. You know, what I would say to a company is, you know, you've got to as well be careful that you know, too many cooks can spoil a broth, and be selective with the support you seek, and you know, you could spend all day talking to, you know, elite leps and, you know, various people, and listen, they're great, they've all got their space, but I think you, as running a business, you've got to work out which tool can do what and how you're going to use them. So that would be my recommendation on all the business support out there. But I think, generally speaking, people are quite open to the support.
Thank you. Jason, we touched a little bit, didn't we, on it's a two-way relationship, in the same way that, you know, you've got to access the university, find out how you do that. Sometimes it's an engagement issue for businesses as well, for you accessing it and gaining. Why do you think that's the case, and how do you try to knock down those walls?
I don't know. I think part of it is maybe this perception that universities are like ivory towers, and businesses maybe thinking this might challenge complex enough or relevant enough to go to a university to find a solution. University, we're like the university on the inside saying, hey, we've got these solutions, do you want to know it? So I think it sounds very obvious, but often sounds like communication. And I think in the last few years, it's been increasingly hard for academics to kind of get out to talk to businesses, to actually talk about innovation that they do and how it can be used. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to increase again, get back to those pre-pandemic levels, but also get more academics out and talking, to break down the barriers. Maybe before that, I think there might be some work universities need to do with their academics in a sense, to help them understand the challenges businesses face, and you know, when you're talking to them, what they want to hear. Because businesses work at a different speed to universities. We're quite slow, I think it's fair to say that, in doing these businesses faster. So you've got to be responsive. When a business comes to you with a challenge, they're not going to want a solution a year down the line. And so I think we need to do some work internally. So when businesses do come along, they do feel more welcomed, and they realise that the universities do understand their problems and solutions and really help solve them. So, you know, as a university now, we are trying to put funds into looking for opportunities for academics to support businesses. And Silverstone Technology Cluster is a really good example of this. They organise the events, we can get out, we can talk. But we've also started to use online platforms more. So really it's just a case here of people getting on each other's radar.
Thank you. Graham, if I come to you, similar sort of question on that then. Does it depend on the size of business and affordability? Do you tend to get larger businesses with structures and money come to you rather than SMEs?
It's more the startups actually. We'll be looking for funding, but again, I just echo the comments. They don't have the resource to be looking, they don't have the network or the contacts or even knowledge of the funding is actually there. Again, it comes back to the same thing about taking your baby from you. There's definitely a fear of that. Also, they're generally working on sewing up the IP to make sure they can actually take it to market, and perhaps think it's too early. You know, again, it's like they've got these ideas, but if I go with it too early, are we going to sort of lose the IP? So there's all that as well. And so yeah, I think it's the same comments.
Okay, thank you. So Philomena, you've been successful, you've done it, you've got the support. What would be your hints and tips to businesses facing some of the barriers we've talked about? Just get on with it, find the right people. What would be your suggestions?
In terms of Innovate funding, or in general?
In general, and support as well, yes.
Well, Innovate, you know, I think apart from the KTP, which has got a very high success rate, the rest of the competition are really tough. So make sure you plan ahead, you write a good proposal, don't leave it to the last minute, because there is nothing worse than sacrificing a holiday to make a deadline for a proposal only to have the proposal being chucked out. And then a lot of time. So start from a great idea, and then make sure that you address the questions in the right way. It's become a really professional job, and you've got to manage the proposal submission like its own project as professionally as you possibly can. In terms of the broader ecosystem for support, I think it very much depends on what type of company you are, and also how much capital you need. Obviously, founders are encouraged to bootstrap as much as they can, because there is the idea of, you know, retaining as much equity as possible. I think you really need to look at your company as a child that needs to grow and move out as quickly as possible. You know, there is nothing better than having an independent company that is sort of in automatic mode to some extent. In our case, certainly we need a lot of cash. Our company is about hardware first and foremost, so there is only so much bootstrapping and to get done. Also, try and look for the best possible partner, really. It might be a specific type of fund or maybe some angel at the beginning, but it's very important that besides, you know, the cash into the bank account, identify the right partner that you can develop synergy with, and that can be with you in the long run, because you definitely know you're starting today, but you don't know exactly how long this is not going to take. So I think there is quite a lot of choice today. We've seen a lot of different funds. Perhaps in terms of scale, you know, the UK is a little bit behind compared to other countries. You know, if you look at the landscape in the US, you know, there is several zeros more, but there is still quite a lot here. And so to some extent, we have, as founders, almost the privilege of choosing the best partner for the journey. And I think that's just as important as having of cash.
Thank you. It's useful. Richard, if I come back to you quickly, support. I think you talked about the fact that people have to be open to accept advice and guidance. So what else can a business do to prepare itself better when it approaches a support provider such as yourself? Can they prepare themselves in advance?
I think, you know, I think they have to establish if they've got the time, they've got the, you know, it's, I think essentially the job is on the on the side of the advisor or the support person that's going to be working with them to actually engage them, and really that's a big part of what I do is just try and engage with people, and once you've got that engagement and once they start to see value in you, then off you go, you're away. But you know, it's getting to that stage where you can have that conversation and try and understand the business, try and work out some things that you can work on together to push them forward. So, you know, I think, you know, I think just be open and transparent. I mean, sometimes it's funny. I've had some meetings with people that have always treated me as if I'm some sort of investor or someone that's sort of, you know, inspecting their business. But that's not the case at all. It's just, I'm just here to help you. I'm not here to sort of do anything else than that. So, you know, but that trust that you develop with people, that comes with a bit of time. And, you know, it's not automatic, it's not given. They're going to tell you everything about their business, perhaps in the first meeting, but, you know, over time you do develop that level of trust, and it can be a very beneficial, but both ways. I mean, you know, I consider myself a bit of a salty old sea dog, really, in terms of things I've done and work and professionally. But this job, actually, my God, I'm not. You know, there's so much that I learned from the companies that I work with. It's very much a two-way street.
So you and the team have seen lots of businesses at any one time. Tell us what's hot at the moment. Tell us what's exciting around innovation. Give us some hints and tips in terms of where we should be looking in the future.
Well, I mean, it's funny, there's one area that's suddenly starting to crop up with quite a few companies that I'm starting to work with, I knew nothing about, which is the metaverse, which is something yeah, I mean, you get, it really splits things, but breaks it.
You're going to have to explain what metaverse is. You're going to have to explain what metaverse is to me. Not the audience.
It's a virtual world where you will put on a pair of goggles and you will exist in that world, and all the brands that you know, you'll have your own goods, virtual goods in that world. I mean, but it's happening, and it's there are increasing number of companies now developing their technologies for that world. But you know, I mean, listen, there are so many. It's so diverse. Almost every couple of months there's a new word that you can put the word tech on the end of it, and there we go. There's a new sector. So yeah, that's really what.
Jason, is there any exciting areas that the Open University are working on at the moment or looking to in the future?
I guess there's two areas where the Open University is focused on, knowledge exchange and innovation. Unsurprisingly, one of them at the moment is education technology. Because if you look at the recent pandemic, before was online distance education been so important, everyone was doing it. And that's an area that the OU's been for about 50 years. And it's an area now that's set to explode. So that's an area that the university is very interested in. It's one that should be involved in. The second area of interest in the university is around the space sector. There's an awful lot being done across the art on the space sector. But the area that kind of interests me most is sort of the downstream applications of technology. So that's how technologies developed in the space sector can be applied for more terrestrial purposes. So a few examples of these from the Open University was the OU, it's got expertise in miniaturizing equipment. And the miniaturizing equipment that basically sniff gases, use comets. And they took that technology and applied it using nuclear submarines. Another one is using satellite data to monitor tree populations. Of course, that's got implications for conservation and disease control. But there's also more practical applications in the sense that you've got trees line roads, they line railway tracks, they've got to be managed. And so, yeah, I think an area of interest here is definitely the downstream applications of space technology.
Thank you. Graham, what side of the industry? Do I need to drive home this afternoon?
So I think there's quite a lot of innovation. It's all electrification of vehicles has just changed massively. So just so many new opportunities there. But there's also lightweighting. There's additive manufacturing. One area is quite interesting: sustainability. Every company now is trying to sort of be more sustainable. It's trying to make more sustainable materials and supply chain. So a recent example we were working on was I didn't realise how many thousands of tons of discarded fishing nets there are in the ocean. Absolutely horrendous for sea life. So the company now collects up these nets, basically processes them, turns them into nylon, and we're using them in carpets, cars, for example. So that should now a business model to actually go and collect it all back up. So that's the sort of area I'm quite interested in. It's mainly sort of just trying to be sustainable in everything we do, which I think everybody's kind of aware of these days.
Sounds like I still need to drive home. Finally, for you, the future for WAM3D. Tell me all about the future for WAM3D and what support you'll still need, assuming you'll still need support.
I cannot tell you anything. It's highly confidential. No, well, obviously we are 3 years old and we are some of the newcomers into the marketplace for large-scale metal printing, despite having kicked off 2006 or so. So the next, I would say, 2 years are about establishing ourselves as a dominant force if we can. We have launched a new series of products literally a month ago, and that's going quite well. There is plans to scale internationally further. We have a joint venture company in Singapore. We're looking to expand into the Middle East and in the US. We are undergoing our B round. In fact, I was going to tell you later, advisors do help, and they're very instrumental in coming prepared to do this problem. We're working with the private entity actually on this piece. So that's taking, of course, quite a lot of time, but we require the cash to take the company to the next level. And then, of course, we've got a massive R&D program that we're trying to execute right now. Obviously, innovation is in our DNA. We're spending everything that we possibly can on R&D program internally, but also with the support of Cranfield. At the moment, we've got about 30 people here in the UK, plan on growing another maybe 10, 15 colleagues in the next couple of quarters. So definitely busy, and by all means, stay tuned, check our website. We've got a number of releases commercially lined up between now and the end of the year, and hopefully company will continue to buy in our vision.
But always open to advice, guidance, and support.
Yes, absolutely. So I think we will submit another proposal for the Innovate UK grant. We will also look a bit more closely now to the innovation loans, now that we have a bit of study history and we can meet those governance criteria. And I think it's a lack of, from the financial strategy point of view, mixing the various sorts of funding and making the most out of the tools available. So I think a lot of valuable information from Innovate UK and public money is there to be spent in a good way, and we've got great ideas and we continue to do.
Great. I don't want to stop you with your lunch because I think lunch is here. So we're ready to go. So, but we do have a chance for a final question. So if you have a final question in the audience, if you want to raise your hand, say who you're from and direct it, hopefully to the panel rather than me, that'd be useful. Anybody has a question?
There is an online question. She says. All right, it's a two-parter, hence we got getting it. All time working with technology about. I've worked with young researchers and research students in universities for a few years. I've often seen graduate and PhD students coming up with some great ideas, but they don't know how to. One second. But they don't know how to commercialize it, especially in terms of financial support. Considering that most of these graduates are young and new in the market, what are the financial support specifically for this group of innovators?
There is a programme, and I'm not an expert, called Young Innovators, which comes with funding and with mentoring. So I would recommend that either that person gets in touch with me or gets onto the Innovate UK website, Innovate UK EDGE website, maybe on actually, and looks at young innovators, and that could be a very useful resource for them.
Excellent. Was there a second part to that?
No, that's it.
If there's no other questions from the audience, then can I just ask you to thank the panel in the normal way?